Hello, I'm Darth Vangoff, and this is another video about Star Wars Saga Edition. In this video, I will discuss how the product of Star Wars Saga Edition, the role-playing game, suffered because of the way Wizards of the Coast handled the product. In this video, I will talk about three main things. First, the releases of the books. Basically, the release schedule of the books killed the edition before it truly picked up momentum. It died before it had a chance to live. The second thing I will talk about is how I feel and why I feel this edition was an afterthought based on how it was created and edited and how it was put together. You know how when you have a homework assignment that you have like 2 weeks to do and you wait till the last minute and you have to quickly do it because you have like all these other life priorities? That's how I feel about this edition, and I will explain why I feel. Basically, there's just a lack of logic, research, inconsistency of rules, and just stuff poorly planned out ahead of time. Like, this edition was kind of done at the spur of a moment and kind of spontaneously, and not really done with a holistic view of what was to be the outcome and product. And my third main point is how Wizards of the Coast failed to truly realize the potential of the product. Basically, this product was supposed to be kind of like an action movie where no matter who you are, you had a chance to try anything, and this was supposed to play out like an action movie or one where your character was supposed to take great risk and there could be great rewards, and how I feel like it didn't quite live up to that. So two things you'll notice about this video is, one, I will not go into as much detail as I have in my previous videos when I discuss the topic or subject matter, and two, I might not have as precise or accurate citation. The reason being is because I don't have the books. The books are in storage right now. Basically, they've been in storage for a year. There's some stuff going on with my house. I'm not going to go into it, but I can't retrieve my books. So if I cite a feat, instead of saying it's on Scum and Villainy page 159, I might say just it's in Scum and Villainy and it's a feat. And it's basically up to you to look in Scum and Villainy in the feat section to find that feat. It's just I don't have the books in front of me right now. And I did my best to look at my notes and double check everything just to make sure I got page numbers right. But there were a few things when I didn't cite a page number. My citations might be a little bit different, might not be as well. And because I don't have the books, I can't look through the books and get more examples. I might be a little brief, especially towards the end. Speaking of citations, I do want to bring up that in a previous video, I had mentioned a series of blog posts that were no longer available. I cited some blog posts called Star Wars Saga Edition, a Preview. These were blog posts that Wizards of the Coast released prior to the edition, and it was basically a sneak peek at what was going to come in the edition. It not only included a sample of the core rulebook and rules, but these articles also contained the philosophy of why the edition was being designed the way it was, and I had cited these in a previous video. So I would like to announce that there is a way to look at these if you're interested. And previously I said they were not referenceable because the websites were taken down. But Wikipedia, that is Wikipedia, has a way for you to look this stuff up. Wikipedia has links. So right now I'm recording and I'm not really editing, but when I edit this video, I should have right now something on the screen showing you where to go. It's basically the Wikipedia page, and you go down towards the bottom. Right now you should be seeing where the links are. So you just go to Wikipedia and you type in Saga Edition and do a search for that. And when you come to the page, just go to the part of the page that I show on screen, and those are the links. So you can now go to these articles that I cited in a previous video. Now let's get into the subject matter of this video, which is how Wizards of the Coast handled this edition as a company. Right now, what you should be seeing on the screen is an image of the Wikipedia page of the Star Wars role-playing game, and specifically the section of the page that I took a snapshot of should be a little grid of the books that were released for Star Wars Saga Edition. So there's this table, and there's books, and there's the release date. And I have two products crossed out only because they're not really relevant to the discussion. But if you look at all the other books, you'll see the title of the book, and in the next column, you will see the release date. Now, the reason why I have this as a table is just so you can see it visually. And here's my biggest criticism of this table. And not the table in and of itself, but the release schedule of the Star Wars Saga Edition books. So, Star Wars Saga Edition, the role-playing game, came out in June 2007. The Starships of the Galaxy book was the second book released. That was in December 2007. The Threats of the Galaxy book was released May 2008. The fourth book, Knights of the Old Republic, was released August 2008. So Knights of the Old Republic was released over a year after the edition. It was the fourth book. So in the first year of Star Wars Saga Edition's life, it had 3 books released. When I first played Star Wars Saga Edition, it was back in June 2007. It was right when the game released. Me and a few friends just got the book and decided to play. And that was our first mistake. Because when you have just the core rulebook, you do not have enough to play the game. So I remember one time we were trying to reference something and the book didn't have it. Because there is so much of the Star Wars galaxy that's not in that book. The Star Wars galaxy is so large that not everything can fit in a single book, understandably. But on the other hand, there is so little in the core rulebook that it wasn't enough to play. So there's this whole wide galaxy. The only ships you can fly are like X-Wings and the YT-1800 because they don't have stats for any other ships. You know, it's just kind of like that. It's just kind of like, oh, come on, I need more to play with. So that's why it's important to have supplementary books come out and support the core rulebook. So if you can only fit 3 or 4 starships in the core rulebook, then you need another book to include the starships. If there are only like 10 or 12 opponents for the PCs to fight in the core rulebook, then you need a book of opponents to fight. And within the first year, the edition achieved that. But I remember a few months after the edition came out, I was wondering where all the books were. And then finally the Starships book came out. The person who originally GM'd that very first Star Wars Saga Edition role-playing game session for me, that GM of mine, he lost interest in the game a year after it came out because there's like barely anything supporting the game. And you can't run a game just based off those first 3 books. I mean, it's a lot better than having just the core rulebook, but there's still a lot that's just missing. By the time the Knights of the Old Republic campaign guide came out, there was about 1 book every other month. So if you look at the table, you can see that about once every other month a book came out starting August 2008. Now that makes you wonder why the edition just didn't come out in 2008. I think what they were trying to do is come out on the anniversary of that very first Star Wars movie back in 1977. So I think the edition was supposed to come out like sometime in May. The date that you're looking at on the screen is June 2007 for the release date of the game. However, the original schedule was May 2007, and I think it was supposed to come out on the anniversary of when the very first Star Wars movie came out in 1977, and this would have been in 2007, so it would have been like a 30 or 40-year anniversary. Hold on, I can do math. It would have been a 30-year anniversary. They didn't even meet that deadline anyways. They had to push the game back like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, but that's what they were trying to do. I can't even remember how I found out that they were trying to release it on the anniversary, but I think that's what they were trying to do. Why else would you release it in 2007 when you didn't have anything else to support the game? I would like to contrast this to Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition. Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition released summer 2008, the beginning of summer if I remember correctly, so probably would have been June. So it was released 1 year after Star Wars Saga Edition. However, it had the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, you want to play D&D with more books than that just to add more stuff to your game. So you would want like a Monster Manual too, to add more monsters to your game, and you want more monsters to select from as a GM. But at least you can play with just the Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Player's Handbook. In Star Wars Saga Edition, you couldn't play with just the 3 books that came out, but Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition had more support than this edition. I think maybe Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition took away from this edition because maybe the company was more focused on it. And if you don't believe me, well, unfortunately, I don't have proof because I am not going to dig around the internet for the proof. I'm going to have to look in some very obscure places for the proof. There was a podcast back in, I think, 2007 or 2008 about Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. And I got the impression from this podcast that they were doing more to support 4th edition than this game. They posed a question of how much Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition are you already playing? And they talked about Star Wars Saga Edition. They talked about how Star Wars Saga Edition had mechanics that were going to be incorporated into Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. I think they wanted Star Wars Saga Edition out a year ahead of time before Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition just to test some of the mechanics out. And I think that might have also hurt Star Wars Saga Edition, only because it should have been treated as its own game and not as a testing ground for another game. I do like how this edition was given support starting August 2008. However, the problem with that is the game basically died by then. I think if any one thing killed this edition, it is what you're seeing on the screen, the release schedule of the books. Killed the game more than anything. However, everything I've said in my previous videos were also definite killers, like the lack of organization and ability to reference anything. My second point in this video is just the lack of research, logic, and inconsistent rules this edition had. Now, if you think that this topic that I'm about to go into is one I covered in earlier videos, you'd be right. However, this time, I'm doing it in a way that didn't fit in any of the other videos, which is why the points I'm about to point out here weren't in any previous video, just because it's more about like, I'm doing this more to show that this edition was more hastily done and seemingly on the side rather than pointing out any actual like problem. Like these things aren't necessarily problems in and of themselves so much as just things that just make me think this edition was done in a rush. So for instance, there's this character in the Jedi Academy training manual. It's a Jedi. His name is Arca Jeth, and his stats are in the Jedi Academy training manual. Again, I don't have the page because I don't have the book in front of me, and I didn't write in my notes, so just look in where the stats are for the Jedi, and you'll see Arca Jeth. He is the person who invented Jedi battle meditation, and in the book, he is level 15. So he's not early in his career, he's late in his career. So look at his stats. What is the one thing he's missing? He is missing the battle meditation talent. He is the guy who invented Jedi battle meditation, and he doesn't even have the Jedi battle meditation talent. Now you could be thinking, well, okay, he's level 15. Maybe by the time he gets to level 16, or 17, or 18, he will have it. So maybe by the time he's level 16, 17, 18, he will have the battle meditation talent. And if a GM wants to run him with the battle meditation talent, they should just add a few levels to him. Okay, that's fair, but let me propose a counterpoint. If you actually read the Tales of the Jedi comic books, which is where he's from, when you see him using Jedi battle meditation, he's not just using the version that's in the core rulebook. He's using an upgraded version. He's not only boosting the morale of his allies, he's also depleting the morale of his enemies and instilling fear in them. He's not only using the battle meditation from the core book, he's also using the version from the Knights of the Old Republic book, which is the upgraded version. He's not just affecting the people around him, he's affecting a whole entire planet, or maybe it's a solar system. Basically, there was this battle waging through an entire planet or solar system, I can't remember. In order for him to have the appropriate feat to demonstrate he has the ability to do that, he needs to level up to level 18, which is the next time he gets a feat. Because the only way he can do that is if he has the Unleashed feat from the Force Unleashed book. So he's not only missing battle meditation, he's missing the improved version, and he's missing the feat that allows him to affect a whole entire planet. So he's not just missing a single level before he gets to the point where he can be accurately represented in what he's able to do in the comic books. So I just think that there's a lack of research or thought put into this edition. Like this guy's stats were hastily put together. And I think in the book, and I don't have the Jedi Academy training manual with me, but I think they even mention he's a master of battle meditation and he's the guy who invented it, but he doesn't have the ability. Then there's the Grand Army of the Republic feat from the Clone Wars book. This one really gets to me, and I don't know why. Why does this bother me? I don't know why. Basically, in several books, they have feats that belong to factions. So in the Clone Wars book, there's the Grand Army of the Republic feat, but there's also the Confederacy feat, and I forget what it's called. The Grand Army of the Republic feat is to represent the training the clone warriors get. So the clones who participated in the Clone Wars have a certain way of fighting, and the Grand Army of the Republic feat is supposed to represent that style of fighting. Conversely, the Confederacy feat is supposed to represent the way the droids fight. So the two factions have two different tactics, and the feats that they have are supposed to represent those tactics. The problem is, not a single member of the Grand Army of the Republic, none of the clone troopers, none of the clones themselves have that feat. So you created this feat, Grand Army of the Republic, to demonstrate that the clone troopers have a different fighting style than any other faction in Star Wars history. It's their feat. However, none of them have it. I forget what it does. I think it gives you a bonus when you're in cover. They're more tactical than the droids. They take cover while the droids just stand in the open because the droids are disposable. So the clone troopers have this way of fighting, and the Grand Army of the Republic feat is supposed to show it, but they don't have the feat. So then why bother having the feat? But also, why don't the clone troopers have the feat? So if you go just by the stat blocks, the clone troopers aren't as different from the droids as they're supposed to be because they lack this feat. This feat was supposed to give the game mechanic to represent their difference in fighting style. So you're not just supposed to say they have a different fighting style. There's supposed to be a game mechanic to support that difference. This is that game mechanic. And it's not. I don't know why this bothers me so much. I think it's just because all factions have their non-heroic characters, and they're all basically not as different as maybe they should be. Why don't you just have one generic goon stat, and that's what all factions use, because there is no difference in their mechanic, and you just say this faction fights differently than this faction. There's no need for a game mechanic to represent it. I don't know. I just, it gets to me. It gets to me. What can I say? Then there's the inconsistent rule. Well, there's two inconsistent rules I want to talk about. One is the example of a character not having full 7 heroic levels before taking on a prestige class. And I mentioned this in a previous video. When you take a prestige class, you're supposed to have 7 heroic levels before you take a prestige class. But a lot of characters just have 1 heroic level and 6 non-heroic levels. So it's a total of 7 levels, with 1 being heroic, at least 1 heroic level before you take on a prestige class. That seems to be the actual prerequisite. What they say is you need 7 fully heroic levels, but when you look at the stats for a lot of the non-heroic characters, they have levels in prestige class, and they only have 1 heroic level before taking level in prestige class. They just have 7 total levels. At least one of those 7 levels has to be heroic, but they don't need the full 7 heroic levels. Well, that even seems to be broken. So the Imperial Field Medic from the Unleashed book, page 173, doesn't have any heroic levels before taking levels in a prestige class. So there you go. Now, another inconsistent rule is the stats for beasts. So beasts don't add their level to defenses. So if you're just a monster or creature or beast, you just add your ability score modifiers. Now, beasts can get levels. If they gain an intelligence of 3 or higher, they can gain levels. Usually it's in Scout because, they're outdoor creatures, and Scout's the outdoors class. But there are some times, like the Jedi Academy Manual, page 132, the Bektori, and the Jedi Academy Training Manual, page 146, the Tarantatek, or however you pronounce it. When you add up the modifiers, they don't add up to the defense values. Why is that? Why are their defenses so high? I mean, for the Bektori, particularly the reflex. Now, there are some times when a beast has a miscellaneous modifier. Usually it's pretty low, like +2, and it's specifically listed. So if something has like a +4 racial bonus to reflex, it'll say, hey, this creature has a +4 bonus to reflex. But these two stats don't have it. Why? Why are their defenses not as they're calculated to be? Maybe there's a modifier they didn't tell us, but what is that modifier? I mean, is this just a typo? I don't want to assume it's not an errata, because there are so many erratas in this edition that I'll get to just a bit. Now, in addition to inconsistent rules like this, there's the rules about the Mandalorian armor, but I already mentioned this in a previous video, how there's 3 separate rules for how Mandalorian armor functions differently than normal armor. Which one's the right one, I don't know, but I mentioned in a previous video, so I'm just going to skip it here. Then there's how this edition is poorly planned out ahead of time. So, for instance, there's the stolen form talent from the Threats of the Galaxy book, page 81. Basically, it's to show that Sith Lords and Sith Apprentices can gain the Jedi lightsaber forms talents. Without this feat, Sith Lords normally couldn't take any Jedi lightsaber forms talent. But there are a lot of Sith who have Jedi lightsaber form talents, so this was basically to show that the Sith stole the form from the Jedis. But then they just decided to errata the Sith Lord and Sith Apprentice class to just have access to the Jedi lightsaber form talents. Like, how could they have made this addition and not realize that they would need to have the Sith Lords have abilities that Jedi have, since a lot of them were former Jedi? And even the ones who aren't former Jedi are taught lightsaber forms by other Sith who were taught by the Jedi. So when they created the Sith Lord and Sith Apprentice class to begin with, why didn't they just give them access to the Jedi lightsaber forms talents? It is a little nitpicky of me, however, I do think it's important just because it shows that it proves my point that this edition wasn't really planned out ahead of time. No one looked at this edition holistically and gave it quality control. This edition lacks quality control. That's what I'm proving in this video. Then there's mass combat rules in the Clone Wars book. So shortly after that book came out, we had a Galaxy of War book. And I remember when that came out, a friend of mine said, "Oh, this is the book that already came out." What's the difference between the Galaxy at War book and the Clone Wars book? They're basically the same book, it's just they have different stuff in them, but you could have combined them and it would have made sense. If you remember back in one of my previous videos, I mentioned the 3-book idea, how you need a book for a campaign setting and a book for a class. Well, it seems like they needed a book specifically for the Clone Wars and a book specifically for the Warrior class. But why weren't the mass combat rules in Galaxy at War? Because that's a book about going to war. So the Clone Wars book just covers the Clone Wars specifically. But maybe the mass combat rules should be applied to other wars. Like, there are other wars that have mass combat. Why is it the Clone Wars have mass combat rules, but none of the other wars fought in the galaxy have mass combat? What? Now, I don't care for the mass combat rules in general, so I don't really miss this, but I still think it's just an example of being poorly planned out. Now, another way to show that this game suffered from a lack of planning, I'm going to go back to that table I mentioned before. So, the table that mentioned the release schedule of the books, I think that was part of the bad planning, because what happened is the Threats of the Galaxy book came out as the 3rd book. Now, that book had sidebars, such as the Miraluka species. The Miraluka species had its statistics shown in the Threats of the Galaxy book, but it was also in the Knights of the Old Republic book. So why is it that the Threats book simply didn't refer to the statistics in the Knights of the Old Republic book? Well, that's because the Threats book came out first. When the Threats book came out, it was before most of the other books. Only the Core book and the Starships book had come out. So it had no other book to reference. So mainly, characters in that book didn't have any of the abilities from Knights of the Old Republic or Force Unleashed. Now, the Miraluka species was something that showed up in the Knights book, but they needed a sidebar just to include the stats because the stats hadn't come out yet. So it was fine that they had one Threats book come out before all the other books, but they probably should have had another Threats book come out, or just have one Threats book that came out after all the other books. Now, the problem with that is, if you had the Threats book and you refer to something, say, in Scum and Villainy, the person using the Threats book might not have had Scum and Villainy, so they might not have known what that talent or ability did. So it could have been problems, but still, I just think they could have had more sidebars, whatever. I don't know. Well, they probably should have just designed the edition so that you didn't need 15 books in the first place. I think that would have been better, just for them to design the edition so you didn't need all those books in the first place. Another problem that I have with this edition is that there are too many errors. There is official errata to fix some of the errors, but it doesn't catch all the errors. I won't show you the official errata just because I don't really care to get into that right now. What I'm trying to prove is that there are so many errors that the people at Wizards didn't even catch them all. Right now, you should be looking at a list of errors that are in the books. I want to emphasize that the errors you're looking at were not caught by the company. There are some things I want to say about what you're seeing right now. First, these are shorthand notes. Originally, when I thought of this video, I intended to read all these out loud, but to cut down the length of this video, I'm just going to show them on screen and you can read them on your own time. My apologies for the fact that this is shorthand note-taking and there is no proper grammar, but this should do. You get the point. So I want you to take just a look at the Unleashed category, all the errors that I found in the Unleashed book. And I just want you to do a quick look at them. What should be coming up on screen right now is a list of the errata for the Force Unleashed book. And I have also displayed the website at which you can find this errata. And this is just an itemized list of the errata, not the actual errata description itself. But take a look at it, and what's in this errata is not in my list. So now a new image should be coming up on screen. It should be the official errata on the left and my errata on the right. You can see that it doesn't overlap. There are errors that I caught that's not in the official errata. And if you notice, there are some pages that are the same, but if you look at the errata, it's not the same as what I caught. So what are these errors that I caught, and how did I catch them? Well, I just caught them by merely reading the books. I just happened to randomly come upon these. So the complete list of the errors that I caught, not just the Unleashed book, but through all the books, should be coming back up on screen again. And these errors are just ones I happen to catch. This is not comprehensive. So I did not go looking for every single error in every single book. There are probably errors that I didn't catch. So all the errors that you see for the Unleashed book, there's probably more in the Unleashed book that I didn't catch. It's just aggravating. And it just shows that this edition was not given a lot of effort. Not a lot of effort was put into this. So here's the big takeaway of everything that I've just explained in this little middle section about like inconsistent rules and hastily implemented rules. Whereas my other videos, I talked about problems with how the game plays or the game mechanics or, game design or referenceability. This is just shoddiness. This is just shoddiness on Wizards of the Coast. I think they were more interested in 4th edition than this edition. I mean, I really do. This edition was not given proper care. The release schedule shows it, and everything I've discussed, the inconsistent rules, how like a guy who's supposed to have invented battle meditation doesn't have the battle meditation ability. It gets to me. It gets to me because this edition could have been so much more if they just put effort into it. Before you came across this video, did you hear of Star Wars Saga Edition? You're probably here because you did, but imagine all those people who don't know Star Wars Saga Edition. I have friends who are interested in playing Star Wars games, but they don't really care to play Star Wars games because they don't have all those Saga Edition books. Like, this edition gets in the way of you playing a Star Wars role-playing game, and that bothers me. And I need to make a video about why that is. Well, I made several videos, in fact. I think this is video number 5. The last thing I'm going to go into in this video is how Wizards of the Coast upheld the core philosophy of this edition. So this edition was made with a certain philosophy. And now that you have the ability to go to the Saga Edition page on Wikipedia and go to those links that I mentioned before, you can kind of figure out what the philosophy of this edition is. And of course, not only go to those links, but go to the Jedi Counseling links I think I mentioned in a previous video. This edition had a certain philosophy, and here's the gist of it. It plays like an action movie. So let's say you didn't build your character to be an action movie character. Well, you know what? This edition allows you to try anything you want with a chance of success. So if your character is just like a book nerd, and they find themselves in a situation where they have to try something heroic, they stand a chance of actually making it. And they could fail, but they actually stand a chance of making it. And the edition is built for that your character is a cinematic action hero. Now, there are pros and cons to this. Admittedly, I know what the cons are. You could argue that if anyone can do anything, that erodes class design. So in Dungeons & Dragons, fighters are fighters and wizards are wizards. But in this game, a noble has pistol proficiency, so a noble can pick up a gun and fight with it. I still think that's okay because soldiers in this edition are obviously better at fighting than nobles. Nobles have a chance of fighting and can contribute, but soldiers are the main powerhouses, so I don't think it's so bad in this edition, although it has caused problems in games that I've played. This edition was made during a time when a lot of gamers were coming off 3rd edition and 3.5, and it was common for players to come from Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition during this time frame. So this did take some getting used to. However, I do think this was the right decision to have a game where everyone had a chance to do something, because this is the Star Wars galaxy. So like I said before, in Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, fighters were fighters, wizards were wizards. In this edition, scoundrels are still scoundrels, nobles are still nobles, scouts are still scouts, soldiers are still soldiers, Jedi are still Jedi. So the ability for anyone to try anything within reason, so someone who's not force sensitive can't use force powers, obviously, but within reason, anyone can try anything, and it doesn't change the fact that they're still a soldier or they're still a Jedi. People still have their classes, and the ability for anyone to try anything doesn't infringe on that, and I love that. The problem comes when the game renegades on you trying to do anything you want. So imagine like you're in a situation where you're behind a soldier. The soldier's wearing armor, specifically wearing a helmet, and he's about to shoot a friend of yours. And let's say you tell the GM, okay, I want to twist the guy's helmet so that it's facing backwards. And so the GM makes up a mechanic for you to try to do that, and he makes you roll a random check that he decides. He decides, you know what, this would be a dexterity check plus base attack bonus check. Or maybe he decides it's a strength check plus base attack bonus check. Basically, maneuver the helmet appropriately and manipulate the helmet appropriately. Okay, so you try it. And then a feat comes out. And again, I don't have the book in front of me, so I can't reference this. But I think it's the Unknown Regions book. It could be the Scum and Villainy book, but I think it's the Unknown Regions book. There's a series of talents where if you get the talent, you get 3 sub-abilities you can use once per day or once per encounter. And basically one of those sub-abilities is the ability to twist someone's helmet so they're blinded until they take an action to set their helmet straight again. Now the purpose of this sub-ability is to give you that ability to twist someone's helmet. But wait, shouldn't you be able to try that without having this specific ability? So let's say you tell the GM you want to grab 2 people and bang their heads together. So let's say the GM says, okay, you're basically dual wielding a weapon. You're dual wielding a grapple. You're grappling 2 people. So he makes you do a attack roll against 2 people. So basically he can ad hoc rules for you to take 2 people's heads and bang them together. But then there's the multi-grab feat from the Legacy era book. And basically that is the feat that gives you the ability to do that. So let's imagine someone gets that feat expecting to do that. And then someone else at the table who doesn't have that feat says they grab 2 people's heads and bang them together. And I think multi-grab doesn't allow you to bang their heads together. I think that's a follow-up feat. Like multi-grab, I think, is a prerequisite for a feat that does that. But basically, someone gets those feats, and then someone else at the table says they do that same thing, but they don't have the feat. So is the GM going to say invalidate someone's getting the use of the multi-grab feat, or going to shoot someone down for trying something that they wanted to do? And this goes for anything grapple related, like pin, crush, throw. Let's say you want to grapple someone and you want to throw them. Well, you can't do it without the feat unless the GM allows it. But then if the GM allows it, then what's the point of getting that feat? Hopefully no one gets that feat, right? Or another thing you can do is treat these as proficiencies, where you're proficient in it if you get the feat. But if you don't get the feat, you can still try it on a -5 penalty, like a proficiency. But the book doesn't do that. A GM has to ad hoc these rules. Basically, this game says it wants you to do anything you want and have a chance of success, but that's anything conventional. Then there's things that you just simply need abilities for, or else you can't do it. But that goes against the spirit of having you try anything with a chance of success. Basically, when they say try anything with a chance of success, the only way that's incorporated in the game is just you can use a lot of skills untrained, and you get half your level as a bonus to your checks. It makes it more likely for an untrained check to succeed, and that's basically the only thing they have in this edition to represent you trying to do anything and having a chance of success, which I think is a mistake. What they should have had in the core book, they should have had like a thing where here's some unexpected things your characters might want to do. Someone may want to bull rush and trip someone at the same time. What are the rules for that? Or what if someone tries to grapple 2 people at the same time and smack their heads together? What are the rules for that? That's what this edition should have done, and it didn't. It seemed like they wanted to open the game up and make it a cinematic action experience, but at the same time, these people were so used to creating Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition and 3.5 and were in that type of mindset that they didn't actually fully embrace that because they were still stuck in the mindset of Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. So this video has been long enough. I was going to do a 6th video, but so much of what I would say would just be a repeat of what I've already stated in previous videos that I'm probably not going to make a 6th video. 5 videos is good enough to explain my criticisms of Star Wars Saga Edition. I'm Darth Vangoff. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you later.